Imagine the break of dawn over the open sea. The sun has yet to rise. The horizon is a blurred line between the leaden waters and the equally leaden sky. The air is so saturated with salt that you can feel its crystals on your lips, your skin, in your lungs. The temperature hovers just above freezing. The wind slices across your face like a razor, and the moisture in the air is so dense that each breath feels like you're drinking the atmosphere. In this primordial void, in this realm of chaos and nature's indifference, a shadow moves. Not black, not white, gray. 7,000 tons of steel glide across the water's surface like a ghost, a vision, something suspended between reality and mirage. A destroyer, a warship. Its silhouette dissolves into the mist as if nature itself hasn't decided whether it truly exists or is merely a trick of light and moisture. Inside this steel leviathan, the turbines breathe with a muted roar. The hull vibrates with the effort of tens of thousands of horsepower straining forward. Waves crash against the sides with a dull metallic clang, each impact a reminder that the ocean tolerates humanity's presence only out of sheer grace. You gaze upon this steel behemoth and ponder the question that has puzzled millions before you. Why is it gray? Why are all warships gray? You're probably thinking, camouflage, of course. And you'd be mistaken. Because what I'm about to reveal will upend your understanding of naval warfare. The real reason has almost nothing to do with hiding. It's about survival on the knife edge between life and death, where every degree of temperature and every wavelength of light determines whether the crew returns home or becomes part of the ocean floor. Let's start with what everyone thinks they know. Camouflage. Makes sense, right? Gray blends with the fog, the clouds, the water at dawn and dusk. Warships are painted gray to be invisible to the enemy. This explanation is so obvious that even many sailors believe it. But here's the catch. It's wrong. To understand why, let's transport ourselves to 1942, World War II, the North Atlantic, a place where the ocean turns into a killer. Here, British convoys struggle to deliver supplies and weapons through waters teeming with German U-boats. The U-boats hunt in packs. They're invisible beneath the waves. They're patient. They're deadly. And the British, in a panic, search for ways to protect their ships. They try everything. Camouflage schemes, zebra stripes, geometric patterns meant to confuse the enemy. Remember those crazy black and white designs on ships from World War I? That was called dazzle camouflage. The idea wasn't to hide the ship, but to make it impossible to gauge its speed and direction. It looked impressive. It worked poorly. Because a submarine doesn't attack with eyes. It attacks with a periscope and trajectory calculations. And for a torpedo, it doesn't matter if you're painted like a circus tent or a ghost. A torpedo isn't fooled by optical illusions. It follows physics. So, in desperation, British admirals begin experimenting with color. They paint ships white. The result is disastrous. White ships are visible for miles against the dark water. They try dark blue. Better, but at night, these ships turn into black holes against the starlit sky. They try green. The ships start blending with the water, but only under certain lighting conditions. And then someone at the Admiralty utters a phrase that sounds like a surrender to common sense. What if we just paint them gray? Medium gray. Not light, not dark. Just gray. And something strange happens. Gray ships start to disappear. Not completely, of course, but they become blurred, indistinct, hard for the eye to pin down. At dawn, they blend with the horizon. At noon, they get lost against the clouds. At dusk, they dissolve into the mist. At night, they become just a darker patch of darkness. Gray is a chameleon color. It's not perfect in any one situation, but it's acceptable in all. It's a compromise between all possible lighting and weather conditions. But here's the thing. That's still not the main reason. Camouflage is merely a side effect, a fortunate coincidence. The real reason warships are painted gray is tied to something far more mundane, yet crucial: heat. Physics. The survival of a steel vessel in a world where the sun tries to turn it into an oven and the ocean into a glacier. Let's delve into how metal behaves under the sun. A warship is not just a floating weapons platform. It's a complex organism made up of thousands of systems, each needing to function flawlessly. Inside the hull are people, hundreds of them. They live, work, and fight in a confined space with no windows, no natural ventilation, and no chance to step outside for fresh air. The temperature inside the ship is not about comfort, it's about combat readiness. When it gets too hot, people lose focus. They make mistakes. Their reactions slow down. In battle, that means death. And this is where the often overlooked physics comes into play. The color of the hull directly affects how much solar energy the metal absorbs. A black hull is a disaster. Black absorbs nearly all radiation. Imagine a destroyer painted black, stationed at the equator under the midday sun. The air temperature is 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The hull's metal temperature can reach 158 to 176 degrees. This heat seeps inside. Air conditioners struggle to cool the spaces but can't keep up. The internal compartments turn into saunas. Electronics start to fail. Crew members collapse from heat stroke. The ship loses its combat capability, not from enemy fire, but from the sun. A white hull is the opposite extreme. White reflects most of the light. Sounds perfect, right? But there's a catch. White only works when the sun is shining. At night or in cold waters, a white hull becomes a different kind of problem. It loses heat too quickly. The metal cools down. Condensation forms on interior surfaces. Moisture is the enemy of electronics and metal. Corrosion begins instantly. Moreover, a white ship is a maintenance nightmare. Any dirt, fuel stain, or rust is visible from a mile away. The ship always looks dirty, and dirt is not just an aesthetic issue. It alters the reflective properties of the surface. A white ship covered in soot and salt deposits is no longer white. It's a dirty gray and requires constant repainting. And so we arrive at gray. Gray sits right in the middle of the absorption and reflection spectrum. It absorbs about 50% of solar energy and reflects the other 50%. This means the ship heats up, but not to critical temperatures. It cools down, but not so quickly as to cause condensation issues. Gray is thermal balance. It's the golden mean between an oven and a refrigerator. But that's not all. Let's delve deeper into how gray interacts with the human eye and the nature of light. The human eye doesn't see objects. It sees light reflected off objects. And here's where the magic of gray begins. Gray is the only color that doesn't have its own wavelength. It's a blend of all wavelengths in equal proportions. When light hits a gray surface, it reflects without distorting the spectrum. This means a gray object takes on the color of the surrounding light. At dawn, when the light is pinkish-golden, a gray ship appears pinkish-golden. At noon under a bright blue sky, gray takes on a bluish hue. At sunset, when everything is bathed in orange and purple tones, the gray ship becomes part of that palette too. Gray mimics. It adapts to the lighting like a chameleon adapts to its background. This isn't camouflage in the traditional sense. It's adaptation. And it works not because the ship hides, but because it ceases to be a contrasting blot on nature's canvas. The psychology of color in confined spaces. Let's delve into a topic that the military isn't particularly fond of discussing: psychology. Specifically, how color affects individuals who spend months inside a steel box, surrounded by an ocean that seems intent on their demise. The color of a ship's hull is more than just an aesthetic choice. It's about creating an internal atmosphere. Military ships are painted both externally and internally, and selecting the right color for the interior is a science in itself. Bright colors can stimulate the nervous system. Red increases blood pressure, quickens the pulse, and induces anxiety. Yellow, after a while, becomes irritating and causes eye fatigue. Blue has a calming effect, but in excess, it can lead to depression. White may appear clean and sterile, But in confined spaces without natural light, white walls can evoke the feeling of a hospital or a prison. And then there's gray. Gray is neutral. It neither excites nor depresses. It simply exists. It's a background color, one that doesn't demand attention. In an environment where people spend months under stress, where each day is a battle against fatigue and monotony, neutrality is a blessing. Gray walls don't oppress. They don't shout. They allow the mind to rest. But there's another aspect, rarely discussed publicly, yet instinctively understood by the military. Gray is the color of seriousness, the color of professionalism, the color of a machine designed not for parades, but for war. Imagine two ships docked in a harbor. One is painted bright white with gold accents, gleaming in the sun like a billionaire's yacht. The other is gray, matte, covered in salt residue and the marks of many months at sea. Which one looks like a combat vessel? Which one commands respect? Gray is not just a color, it's a message, a statement. We're not here for beauty, we're here for business. And that business is warfare. Let's be honest, military ships exist for this very purpose. They're built to project power, to deliver weaponry, to destroy enemies and protect allies. And gray is the visual embodiment of this function. It doesn't decorate, it doesn't entertain, it performs. Now, let's fast forward to the present. In the age of radar, infrared sensors, satellites, and drones, you might think that the color of a ship's hull has become irrelevant. After all, modern detection systems don't rely on the human eye. Radar sees through fog and darkness. Infrared cameras detect heat signatures. Satellites observe from orbit. So why bother with paint color? Here's where the story gets even more intriguing. The military not only continues to paint ships gray, but they also take it even more seriously. Modern naval paint is not just pigment mixed with solvent. It's a high-tech coating developed in secret labs with million-dollar budgets. These paints contain special additives that absorb radio waves, reducing the ship's radar signature and making it less detectable by enemy systems. This is known as stealth coating. A gray ship covered in such paint reflects radio waves not like a mirror, but like a sponge. The signal is scattered, absorbed, distorted. On a radar screen, the ship appears smaller than it actually is, or it might not appear at all. But that's not all. Modern naval paints also include infrared suppressants. These chemical compounds alter the way heat is emitted from the hull's surface. An infrared camera doesn't see the object itself, but the heat emanating from it. A metal hull heated by the sun glows in the infrared spectrum like a beacon. But special paint can disperse this heat more evenly, making the ship less visible to thermal imaging. And what color is this miracle paint? Gray. Because gray, as we've established, provides the optimal thermal balance. When you add radio-absorbing and infrared-suppressing properties, you get a ship that's invisible not only to the human eye, but also to machines. Let's dive into the practical side of things, exploring why gray is not just a stylistic choice, but an economically savvy one. A warship is arguably the most expensive toy humanity has ever crafted. A modern destroyer carries a price tag of around $2 billion, while an aircraft carrier can soar to $13 billion. And that's just the initial investment. The cost of maintaining a ship throughout its service life can rival its construction cost, with a significant portion dedicated to painting. The ocean is a harsh environment. Salt water relentlessly attacks metal, with corrosion beginning the moment a ship touches the sea. Paint is not mere decoration. It's a vital shield between steel and the ocean's corrosive embrace. This protective layer requires constant renewal. A ship undergoes a full repaint every few years, with partial touch-ups happening almost continuously. Consider a modern destroyer with a hull surface area of approximately 5,000 square meters, excluding superstructures, masts, and deck fittings. The total area needing paint approaches 8,000 square meters. Naval-grade paint costs about $200 per liter, and covering 1 square meter requires about half a liter, accounting for all primer and top coat layers. Let's do the math. 8,000 square meters times half a liter times $200 equals $800,000 just for the materials. That's solely for the paint, excluding labor, surface preparation, and the ship's downtime in the dock. Now factor in labor. Painting a warship demands a specially trained crew of several dozen people working for weeks. These professional painters, experts in naval work, come with a hefty price tag. They handle hazardous materials under dangerous conditions, adhering to strict quality standards. Add to the paint and labor costs the expense of downtime. A destroyer in the dock for painting is a destroyer not fulfilling its mission. Maintaining a warship costs about $1 million per day. If painting takes a month, that's $30 million in lost operational readiness. In total, a single painting cycle for one ship can approach $35 to $40 million. This process repeats every 2 to 3 years. Multiply that by the number of ships in the fleet. The U.S. Navy has around 280 combat ships. Regularly painting them all racks up tens of billions of dollars annually just to maintain appearances. Here's where gray demonstrates its economic edge. Gray paint wears down more slowly than any other color. It fades less under the sun and better conceals dirt and minor damage. This means extending the interval between paint jobs. Instead of repainting every 2 years, you can stretch it to 3. The savings are monumental. A third of the expenses simply vanish. Moreover, gray paint is versatile. The fleet doesn't need to stock various colors for different ship types. One standard shade fits all, simplifying supply logistics, reducing error chances, and enabling bulk purchases for volume discounts. Now let's delve into specific scenarios, wars and ships, that proved gray isn't just a smart choice, but sometimes the very reason lives were saved. Take the Falklands War in 1982. The British fleet ventured to the other side of the globe to reclaim islands from Argentina. The combat conditions were nightmarish. The South Atlantic in the dead of winter, with 10-meter-high waves and winds that could sweep people off decks. Visibility swung from 0 to infinity within minutes. In this chaos, Argentine aircraft hunted British ships using French Exocet missiles. These missiles skimmed the water surface, nearly brushing the waves, homing in on the contrast between a ship and its background. A dark ship against a light backdrop, or a light ship against a dark one. Both make excellent targets. Imagine a gray ship cloaked in a misty shroud, suspended between a gray sky and gray waters. A true enigma for targeting systems. The contrast is nearly non-existent. Missiles often lose track of their target at the last moment, or miss entirely. Yes, several British ships were sunk, like the Sheffield, Coventry, and Ardent. But think about how many more might have been lost if they had been painted white or dark blue. The gray didn't render them invincible, but it granted their crews precious extra seconds. In warfare, seconds can be the fine line between life and death. Now, let's shift to the Persian Gulf during Operation Desert Storm in 1991. Here, the conditions are entirely different. No storms, no gray skies, just the relentless sun blazing down on a sea as flat as a tabletop. The water is a vivid blue, the sky cloudless. You'd think a gray ship would stand out like a sore thumb. Yet, the opposite occurs. The intense heat creates a shimmering mirage. The air above the water quivers with thermal currents, and in this haze, a gray ship blurs into a mirage. Its outlines lose clarity, appearing farther away, closer, or simply indistinct. Iraq attempted to strike coalition ships using coastal missile batteries, but their hit rate was disastrously low. Partly due to missile defenses, yes, but also because operators struggled to pinpoint the distance to these gray ships in the shimmering air. They could see the ship, but they couldn't accurately determine its spatial position. The combination of gray paint and heat-induced optical illusions turned these vessels into phantoms, visible yet elusive. Now, let's journey to the Arctic, where modern NATO exercises take place beyond the polar circle. The temperature plunges to minus 30 degrees. The sea is a frozen expanse. Everything is white, snow, ice, fog cling to the rigging. Logic suggests a gray ship should be glaringly obvious, a dark blot on a white canvas. Yet again, something unexpected happens. Arctic light is unique. The sun hovers low on the horizon even at noon, casting long shadows and creating a complex interplay of reflections off the ice and snow. In this diffused, reflected light, a gray ship doesn't appear black. It blends into the shadowy side of an iceberg, or resembles a cloud of fog, or a dark streak of water between ice floes. The Arctic is a realm of gray shades. White snow on gray ice beneath a gray sky with dark gray, leaden clouds and nearly black patches of open water. A gray ship melds into this palette. It doesn't vanish entirely, but it doesn't shout its presence either. Now, let's delve into the evolution of gray, how its shades have transformed over the years in response to advancements in detection technologies and weaponry. The gray of World War II isn't the same gray used today. In the 1940s, the primary threat came from optical observation systems, human eyes peering through binoculars or periscopes. The gray of that era was optimized for human vision, slightly lighter than today's, as most battles occurred in daylight with good visibility. In the 1950s and 60s, radar technology emerged. Suddenly, optical camouflage became secondary. The focus shifted to reducing radar signatures. Gray paint was modified with radio wave absorbing particles, darkening the shade because these pigments were inherently dark. The 1970s saw the advent of infrared targeting systems. Missiles began to track thermal contrasts. Once again, the paint was altered, incorporating components to more evenly disperse heat across the whole surface. The shade grew even darker, with a matte texture to minimize infrared emissions. In the 1980s and 90s, laser systems, rangefinders, and target designators came into play. Paint was modified yet again, with pigments that scatter laser beams rather than reflecting them directly back. Modern gray is the culmination of 70 years of relentless evolution. It's not a single color, but a spectrum of shades, each meticulously tailored for specific types of vessels and theaters of war. Destroyers in the Mediterranean are painted a lighter gray, reflecting the abundant sunshine and sparse fog. Meanwhile, frigates in the North Atlantic don a darker hue, suited to the generally gloomier lighting conditions. Every nation's navy has its own unique gray standard, crafted for the environments in which it typically operates. The American haze gray subtly differs from the British Mediterranean gray, which in turn is distinct from the Russian and Chinese standards. These differences are nuanced, invisible to the untrained eye, yet crucial. Each shade is a strategic response to particular threats and conditions. Here's the fascinating part. Despite the myriad differences, the fundamental concept remains unchanged. Gray. Everyone returns to gray. All experiments with alternative colors, all quests for something superior, inevitably lead back to gray. Why? Because the laws of physics are immutable. Human vision hasn't evolved in a century. The nature of light remains constant. Gray is the optimal solution to an equation with countless variables. Now, let's delve into a potentially contentious topic. Are there alternatives to gray? Have navies ever attempted to abandon it entirely? The answer is yes, they have. And each time, they returned. The most renowned experiment was conducted by the Swedish Navy in the 1970s. The Swedes decided their ships, primarily operating in the Baltic Sea, should be painted in colors optimized for that specific region. The Baltic is a unique sea, shallow, often foggy, with water tinted a peculiar gray-green due to abundant algae. Swedish naval designers crafted a special camouflage, not gray, but a complex pattern of gray-green and gray-blue shades. The idea was for the ships to blend seamlessly with the Baltic's waters and mists, outperforming plain gray. Initial results were promising. In Baltic conditions, the new camouflage indeed worked slightly better. The Swedes began repainting their entire fleet. Then, the issues arose. The intricate multicolor scheme required significantly more time and money to apply. Painting a single ship took 3 times longer, with costs escalating accordingly. The real challenge emerged when Swedish ships participated in international exercises beyond the Baltic. In the North Sea, the Baltic-specific camouflage failed. The water was a different color. The lighting conditions varied. Ships that were nearly invisible at home stood out like circus tents in foreign waters. The Mediterranean was even worse. The Swedes encountered a classic optimization dilemma. Optimizing for one set of conditions inevitably compromised performance in others. The Baltic camouflage was perfect for the Baltic, but once a ship left home waters, it became less effective than standard gray. By the late 1980s, the Swedes quietly abandoned the special camouflage program. New ships were painted in standard gray once more. By 1995, the entire Swedish fleet had reverted to gray. The experiment cost millions of kroner and reinforced what was already known. Gray works everywhere. Specialized schemes only excel in narrow conditions. In the real world, versatility triumphs over specialization. Gray and the psychology of war. Now, let's return to the moment of truth, when gray meets the harsh reality of battle. When a ship is under fire, when the crew fights for survival, imagine a missile strike. A modern anti-ship missile hurtles through the air at nearly 600 miles per hour. From the moment it's detected to the moment it strikes, less than a minute passes. In that fleeting moment, the crew must perform the impossible. Missile defense systems must lock on to the target. Interceptor missiles must be launched. Electronic jamming systems must attempt to disrupt the missile's guidance. And then, impact. Explosion. Fire. Metal tears like paper. Compartments fill with smoke, water, burning fuel. People scream. Alarms blare. Lights flicker and die. Emergency lighting kicks in. Dim, red, barely cutting through the haze. In this chaos, the gray walls become a lifeline. Because on gray, water splashes are visible. You can see where the leaks are, where to run to avoid drowning. On gray, flames are visible. You can see where the fire is, what needs extinguishing first. On gray, the shadows of others are visible. You can see who is injured, who is conscious, who needs help. Gray doesn't hide damage, it reveals it. Bright paint would obscure these vital clues in the chaos. Gray provides the crew with the information they need to fight for the ship's survival. It sounds paradoxical, but it's true. The gray color that conceals the ship from enemies outside helps the crew see and combat damage inside. It's a dual-purpose solution. And this isn't just theory, it's been proven in real battles. Now, let's talk about the future, about how gray is evolving to meet new threats and technologies, because military science never stands still. Enemies don't rest. What worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. The next revolution in naval paint is already being developed in secret labs. It's about adaptive camouflage, paint that can change color based on lighting and background conditions. Imagine a ship coated in paint containing microscopic capsules with different pigments. These capsules respond to electrical signals, expanding or contracting to change the surface color. In bright daylight, the ship is light gray, almost white, blending with the sunlit water. At dawn and dusk, it shifts to a pinkish gray, matching the light. At night, it darkens to nearly black. In fog, it takes on a medium gray, perfect for those conditions. It sounds like science fiction, but the technology exists. It works. The challenge is cost and durability. Adaptive paint currently costs about 100 times more than standard naval paint, and it's not yet robust enough to withstand years in the ocean, exposed to waves, salt, and UV rays. But the technology is improving. Costs are dropping. Reliability is increasing. In 10, maybe 15 years, the first ships with adaptive camouflage will set sail. And they will still be based on a gray palette, because gray is the foundation. Gray is the starting point from which all variations begin. There's another avenue of research, plasma cloaking. The idea is to envelop the ship in a cloud of ionized gas, plasma, that absorbs radio waves and distorts visual images. The ship is literally shrouded in a glowing mist, making it invisible to radar and hard to spot with the naked eye. The technology is in its infancy. Energy demands are massive. Side effects are unpredictable. But the concept works in lab conditions, and if it ever becomes practical, what color will the ship be under the plasma shell? Gray. Because plasma cloaking is an active system, it can fail, it can be turned off to save energy, and when it's inactive, the ship needs passive protection. Good old gray paint. The future of naval technology lies in multi-layered defense systems. Imagine adaptive camouflage, plasma cloaking, radar-absorbing coatings, infrared suppression, and laser scattering all working in harmony. Each layer complements the others, creating a formidable shield. And at the core of this sophisticated defense, the humble gray. Simple, reliable, time-tested gray. When high-tech systems fail, when batteries die, when generators stall, paint remains. This paint must function independently, without electricity, computers, or external support. Gray always performs. That's its superpower, reliability. Let's delve into something more philosophical. What does the gray of naval ships say about our civilization, about us as a species, about our values and priorities? Choosing to paint warships gray reflects a particular worldview, a worldview that values function over form, efficiency over aesthetics, results over process. It's a pragmatic utilitarian perspective deeply rooted in Western civilization over the past 2 centuries. The Industrial Revolution taught us that machines must be efficient. Beauty is nice, but secondary. What matters is whether something works, not how it looks. Gray warships embody this philosophy. They don't strive to be beautiful, though. As we've discussed, they possess a stark beauty of their own. They strive to be effective. In this pursuit of efficiency, they become honest. They don't pretend to be something they're not. They don't disguise themselves as cruise liners or merchant vessels. They boldly declare, "I am a warship. I am built for war." And gray is visual honesty. It's a rejection of embellishment. It's a statement that our mission is serious and we take it seriously. Contrast this with other eras. During the Age of Sail, warships were often adorned. Carvings on the bow, gilding on the stern, painted gun ports, flags and pennants fluttering in the wind. Ships of that time were works of art, floating displays of their owners' wealth and power. But industrial warfare changed the equation. When a nation's survival is at stake, when the enemy has machine guns, torpedoes, and submarines, carvings and gilding become luxuries one cannot afford. Resources must go to armor, weaponry, engines. Aesthetics must yield to necessity. Gray is the aesthetic of necessity. It's an acknowledgement that we live in a world where priorities are starkly defined. Survival is paramount. Everything else is secondary. Gray and the sea. There's another aspect, rarely discussed but understood by anyone who's seen a warship in person. The sea is indifferent to us. It's neither malevolent nor benevolent. It simply is. It can be as calm as a mirror, and within an hour, turn into a boiling hell capable of tearing a ship in half. Humans have understood this since the first person decided a piece of wood could carry them to the other shore. The sea is a realm where human rules don't apply, where titles and wealth mean nothing in the face of a storm, where survival depends on respecting forces you cannot control. And the gray of warships is an acknowledgement of this reality. It's not an attempt to conquer the ocean or oppose it. It's an attempt to become part of it, to blend in, to move through it like a shadow, not to challenge, but to glide unnoticed. A gray ship is an act of humility before the grandeur of nature, clad in the guise of technological superiority. Now that we've dissected all the rational reasons, all the technical justifications, all the economic calculations, let's admit something else. There's something deeply human in the gray of warships, something tied to our relationship with the sea, with war, with mortality. The gray hue of naval ships is not a matter of design flair. It's a philosophy of pragmatism and survival that asserts beauty is secondary to function, Efficiency outweighs aesthetics, and sometimes the wisest choice isn't the most obvious or striking, but the most balanced. Each gray vessel is a manifesto. It declares that humanity has learned not to conquer the ocean, but to coexist with it in a delicate truce. We've accepted the rules of this game and play by them, harnessing every advantage offered by science, engineering, and common sense. The ocean is unforgiving. It offers no second chances, acknowledges no authority. The only way to survive is to respect its laws. Gray is an expression of that respect, a quiet acknowledgement that we are guests in its domain. We sail its surface not as conquerors, but as travelers aware that at any moment, the ocean can remind us who truly holds dominion. In this humility, in accepting our own vulnerability, lies a unique form of strength. The strength not to fight the inevitable, but to leverage it. The strength not to shout our presence, but to move silently, efficiently, lethally. A gray ship doesn't announce itself. It simply performs its duty. In a world where survival is a task, not a privilege, this is the only philosophy that makes sense. Next time you see a gray warship in port, in a photograph, or on the news, remember this story. Remember that behind this simple, unassuming color lies a universe of engineering thought, historical experience, and human ingenuity. Remember that the ship is gray not because someone couldn't think of anything better. It's gray because it's the best choice among all possible options, a choice proven by time, wars, and countless miles traversed across the most hostile environment on our planet. Gray is the color of professionals, the color of those who understand that naval warfare is not theater or parade. It's a deadly serious endeavor where every detail, every decision, every choice can mean the difference between life and death. And somewhere right now, at this very moment, a gray ship is slicing through the ocean's surface. The crew inside is doing their job. The turbines are breathing. The hull vibrates with tension. And that ship is gray. Not by accident, not by tradition, but because after a century of experimentation, humanity has found the one color that allows survival where nature leaves no room for error.